So before I worked for Avasant, I worked in private equity for a number of years, and it got me very interested in sort of how companies are valued. What is behind the valuation of some of these companies? And a few things hold true. What sort of constitutes enterprise value in modern acquisitions today is actually more and more tied to the customer lifetime value. It's tied to your ability to anchor yourself to that customer. Knowing your customer has a direct impact on your market valuation is sort of what that translated into. And the lifetime value of that customer was directly tied to the loyalty of that customer. And back in, it seems like sort of pre-2000, businesses were all focused around areas like products and trademarks and brands. And around 2010, I think Amazon's probably the strongest use case study, but you started to see that digital connection with the customer became very sticky, right? It drove that customer loyalty, even more so than pricing. I think we've sort of found out over time, as you've seen things like drop shipments start to take place, that people are more attracted to that, that customer loyalty. So that being said, this created a little bit of a shift in terms of how companies embraced digital, how they thought about digital, how they thought about that customer experience, and how that directly tied to the valuation of that company, to the success of that company, to the market share of that company. So you may ask yourself, all right, how do you drive customer loyalty? There's some pretty simple factors, simple conveniences. Most of the studies sort of point down to sort of three key elements. One of them is you just have to be easy to deal with, right? You can't be hard to deal with. How do you make that frictionless experience, as they say? You got to anticipate what your customers want before they need it. We'll talk a little bit about that and how we do that. And you got to know where things are breaking down and be hyper responsive to make that up or fix those issues with your customers. So the key question is, how does a digital strategy, both a back-end digital operations and a front-end digital customer experience, drive that? And we're gonna open some of those topics up today. We have a couple of guests that I'll introduce. Karyn Furstman, who's the head of customer experience at Designit. She's their Wipro company, so I think she lives and breathes this every day. A good friend of mine, Caviedes, from CEMEX. He's the vice president of commercial development at CEMEX. So why don't you guys introduce yourselves, and we'll open up a few of these questions.
Sure. Thanks, Matt. I'm Karyn Furstman. I'm the VP of Customer Experience for Designit, a Wipro company. We're essentially an experience innovation firm. So if you think marketing, design wrapped in customer experience, how do we help really perfect those at every interaction? And really excited to be here. I have lots of practitioner. I was chief experience officer for financial institutions for many years. So I live and breathe all about customer experience.
Oh, thank you, madam, for the invitation. I think my experience is more on the business side. So for me, all these tech things are a little bit new. But I think I bring the perspective of what works, what is practical, and what can be, have a high adoption in terms of applications, new experiences. And I think that's what my perspective is, not too much the part of the IT.
All right, okay. So Karyn, I'm gonna start with you.
Okay.
Am I onto something? Let's start there. Is that whole customer experience, is that digital interface, does it mean as much as I think that it means, as much as it seems like it means?
Absolutely, you're onto something. I do think the three areas that you've indicated, it's not that easy, right? As we all know, it is a lifetime journey of how do you truly incorporate in your process, in your operations, everything about the customer. Digital experience absolutely is critical. I'm going to be a little provocative here just by saying that, and I know we're talking about digital experience, but when you think about it from the customer perspective, whether your customer is an employee, whether your customer is an end customer, a partner, a shareholder, they want to interact with you how they want to interact with you. So while digital is absolutely critical, it is still just one component of an omni-channel strategy.
What are the design principles of an omni-channel strategy? What are the things that you have to think about as you're designing, multiverse, omniverse, all of these things that we've been talking about this conference? What are some of the design principles as you set apart?
Yeah, and I think you talked about some of them, certainly ease and intuition and frictionless as we talk about. But what does that really mean from the customer perspective? It means that wherever I am interacting with you or wherever I have a problem, I loved your component around how do we recover. So many companies don't do that. So it's really understanding every element about how your customers are interacting with you if they have a problem. And then you get to earn the right to anticipate their needs to give them and serve them more.
So, Jesus, I think this becomes real at CEMEX, right? You guys sort of have a lot of different components. You're not just a cement company, you're really a logistics company. I'd love to know, how does this come into play at CEMEX? Can you give us some real life examples?
Yeah, I think first is I would like to answer the question in two sides. No? I think the first one is from the side of the customers. No? What we have learned from customers. No? As it was mentioned before by Maher, I mean, in 2018, we have the opportunity to launch a platform that is called CEMEX Go. Yeah? That's a platform that is very comprehensive in terms of the services that it provides. It has the quote-to-cash processes. No? And what we notice is the adoption just skyrocketed. No? So within 3 years, we reach around 60% of transactions. That is close to $6 billion. But not only that, but in some countries, we reach 90%. In some of the functionalities, also 100%. So that was very encouraging. So we feel, I think we are going into the right track now. The other part is on our businesses. No? As many of you may know, we have 3 main businesses. We have cement, aggregates, and ready-mix. And the ready-mix business is very particular. No? Maybe you have seen these large trucks in the street. Well, it has 3 challenges that are very, very complex. No? And I think technology can help us to solve it. No? The first one is how customers select the products. No? You may think that you just go into a catalog of 10 products. No. You have to select a product that goes specific to the job site. But not only to the job site, but to the element that you're going to build. So it's a product for the columns, for the beams, on the slab. Okay? So a city, for example, of Los Angeles maybe have 5,000 products that they have to be set up so they can choose the right product. But the challenge doesn't end there. We have to manufacture that product, and that product is fresh. So it perishes with 45 minutes. So in those trucks, you have like a giant soup that is cement, aggregates, and water. And it has to be from manufacturing to the site in only 45 minutes. Okay? And the customer not only asks for one, he asks for several ones. And the spacing between trucks, they have to be within minutes because that product has to be pumped. So if you don't have a continuous flow of product, the pump stops working. Okay? And the last challenge is the customer has to place it within 30 minutes of receiving the product. Okay? So all those challenges, we think technology will help us to solve it. So we are already making some advancements, and we're very excited.
It's funny, because when I first started to know CEMEX, and they gave us the example of the ready-mix delivery, I'm like, oh, it's a logistics company like Amazon. And I think everyone laughed at me, and they're like, no, it's more like a logistics company like Amazon that has to deliver 50 truckloads of ice cream, and they've all got to be delivered without any of it melting over a period of about 1 hour. And so that's the complexity that's involved. So as you solve logistics challenges like that have to do with, let's just call them perishable goods, what are the technologies that come into play? Of course, a nice mobile interface is helpful, but it seems like the ability to do real-time tracking and other technologies are actually even more meaningful. Can you give us some examples of technologies?
Yeah, I think we are relying in basically 4 technologies. One is, of course, the interfaces that we have to do either mobile or web. I think it's still very important for us. The second one, as you mentioned, I think track and trace is very critical. The other one is all the part of artificial intelligence and machine learning for all the scheduling and resource planning is very critical so that we can maximize our assets. And then the last one that is also very important is all the data management, because without the data, the process cannot run.
How do these things translate into real benefits for your customers? So of course, the technology is the technology, but that's not a meaningful benefit. So what are the kinds of things that help you realize as it relates to deliveries, bridges being built, all of the stuff that you guys are an important component of?
I mean, if I were to give an example, for example, in terms of the platform, I mean, let's say we don't build, let's say, like an app for a teenager that is in his room. I mean, basically, what we have to do is an app for a construction site manager that is maybe in the 18th floor, receiving concrete, and there is noise, there is a lot of weather conditions, there is no an office environment, he has his notebook or anything. So we have to place within his hand an app that allows him to know what is happening, and if something goes wrong, he can react immediately. Okay? So we are already developing these applications. We are already testing in Israel and the US. We have very good initial results, but this is the kind of challenges that we have. No? So customers are very delighted when they say, are these real? Are this is gonna, work? And when they see it really working in real time, they're very excited.
Yeah, the types of real-time tracking that you can do now didn't even exist 5 or 6 years ago. Pretty amazing.
Yeah, in the tracking side, I think, as you can imagine, we have different sets of fleet. No? Part of the fleet is ours, that is easier to implement. Then we have holders that are kind of not very difficult, but we have also independent drivers. No? So we have to also make sure that all of them come together and we can monitor what is happening.
So Karyn, tell me, you see this cross-industry, right? So not just logistics, you see everything. We've talked about front-end digital interfaces. We've talked about the back-end technologies that enable that. Are the themes different across industries? Are the themes the same? Tell me what you're seeing.
Yeah, I think very, very similar, and in Jesus's business, very complex. But we do see it in a lot of industries that we work with. In the technology space, we have a big client who had a huge retail store franchise, and our company developed all of the interfaces for the in-store experience. And then, March 2020 happens, and all those stores shut down. So really quickly having to pivot, but think about what the consumer would still want to do. So developing QR codes and ways for customers to be able to interact. I think what's really important as well as we come back to a new way of living, because there's not a new normal really, but that people as employees, and we talked about earlier today, the workforce, right? We have to work with consumers however they want to interact. So even though stores have been opening up, they still want that capability to be able to either shop or interface with whatever channel they want. And my personal experience too is I think on the consumer side, it's been hard to ramp up that customer experience again. I'm sure many of you have stories about airlines and all of, again, from the supply chain, from workers not wanting to come back. So we definitely see that across lots of channels.
Jesus, what's your experience with how do you deploy these things? I mean, there's so much. You can do a lot. I don't think you can turn it all on at once. I don't know if you can turn it on by region. How do you take some of these technologies, take some of these tools that enable the business and deploy them across a company that sits in, all continents and that does the kind of work you guys do? Is it iterative? Is it slowly? Is it by region? What are the rollout protocols?
We tend to, we have around 28 countries, thousands of customers, but we tend to have an approach in two ways. Now, one is, once we know exactly what we need to deploy, then we kind of use like an exploit situation, in which what we do is like normal process and IT exercise in which we have roadmaps. So we have the governance that those new functionalities will be, let's say, absorbed by the operation and then deployed and move as fast as possible into have adoption from customers. And then we have the situation where we're not very clear of what we want to deliver. In that case, we do more like an exploration process in which we try to do fast prototyping, do a lot of testing and validation with customers. We tend to do around 9 validations. And then after that, we try to do MVPs with light code, a lot of A/B testing. And then once we're certain, then we tend to deploy it. Before, we used to do it in only one country. Now we're doing all the A/B testing in around 3 to 4 countries to have more variety of scenarios. And then once it's set, we put it in the pipeline of the replication. But it's very exciting. To be honest, it's all co-creation, a lot of feedback. We have had a lot of, I think, amazing experience. We have thought initially some kind of features, and then when we come into the reality, customers completely reject what we thought. So it's a very, very exciting exercise.
So we talked a little bit, Karyn, about customer loyalty. That's huge, right? That seems to be one of the big drivers. But there's other benefits to this. As you deploy this stuff, what have you learned along the way? What are the other things that we're not talking about that are also sort of the peripheral benefits? Yeah,
I think sometimes as a chief experience officer or chief marketing officer, you come in and say, we're going to increase our loyalty by X. And in financial services, certainly where, insurance and banking, I'm working with CFOs and CIOs saying, well, what does that actually mean? So I think showing the correlation and actually demonstrating the correlation to your business metrics, right? So in an insurance company, as an example, retention is key. And so how do you look at your loyalty and the improvements that you're making, and how does that track to your retention benefits? I think the other absolute key metric is, and we've talked a little bit about it over the last day and a half, is employee engagement. You can't have what Jesus is talking about, you can't have that if your employees are frustrated to do their job every single day. So employee engagement, employee satisfaction, and keeping a pulse on that is absolutely tied to that loyalty.
So a lot of the companies I think that are here today and that we talk to are not just dealing in the metaverse, right? They deal with physical goods. Jesus, you guys deal with physical goods, so real life things that have to be delivered, real life people that have to be interacted with. And I think some portions of this digital strategy make an experience easier and smoother with technology, but how do you sort of infuse that in with the people and the physical processes that are necessary to deliver an end-to-end service is sort of one of the keys. I'll liken maybe the Amazon acquisition of Whole Foods is one I always like, right? Because I hated sticking stuff in boxes and shipping it back myself, so I would probably just let it sit there and never send it back. But drop it off in the Whole Foods, order it on the phone, makes that experience very easy, very quick, very intuitive for me, and everyone probably has their own angle into that particular prism in terms of what experience makes the most sense. So how do you find that right harmonization? I'll ask both of you actually. How do you find that harmonization between the people, the in-person processes, what makes sense to be digital? How do you not over-engineer a technology experience where it potentially may dampen down that experience in terms of what the total possibility would be? How do you make sure we don't over-engineer these things?
Yeah, I would say I'll start, and then absolutely, I'm sure, Jesus, you have a strong point of view as well. I think technology, as important as it is an enabler. And I've seen organizations with big change transformation roadmaps that just do the technology and forget the other pieces. So I think it absolutely has to be a balance, and engaging, again, the employees and your customers along the journey, which you talked about before, which I think is really a best practice of don't just set it and forget it and say, oh, we got customer feedback early on, but actually take that customer feedback, have your employees be part of that, and develop the processes with the customer at the center to support the technology.
Yeah, I think what we did is in a very early stage, we kind of set what will be our North Star in terms of the experience that we were planning. So we conduct a lot of internal interviews and customers and kind of have a set of what will be our North Star. And within our North Star, we were very clear in which touch points digital will be preferred and which one will continue to be human to human. And I think that helped us a lot not to, let's say, overdone certain things, and to concentrate in the journey. What we see is, I think, all the elements across the journey, they will be assisted by technology. But I think some of the end customers, they feel very comfortable. All the transactional part, I think, eventually will be almost completely done through digital means. Even customers that they want to interact from their machines to our machines in direct interactions. And I think they will value the human interaction when it brings advice and uncertainty of choosing the right product or how to schedule the right construction plan. So that's what we see. But it's more planned than, let's say, chaotic and improvising. It's already set up in a plan.
So one of the concepts at CEMEX that I learned along the journey working with you guys was this concept of virtual managed inventory, right? And sensor deployments that would hopefully prevent someone from ever even having to call an order. And I think that's sort of the ideal state, right? Your CEOs told me over and over, the ideal state is no one ever has to call us. The goods just flow. No one ever has to think about it. And I think we're sort of like 25% of the way there with what's possible, right, in your industry. And it seems like it was probably 10 years ago, maybe 8 years ago, I don't remember for sure, but I've been working in digital operations a long time, and everyone, RPA is going to solve all these problems. Everything's going to get automated. We're not even going to have to worry about it. And here we are 8 years later, and it doesn't seem like RPA solved any problem. Don't take that the wrong way, anyone, but not in the same way that it was predicted. So where are we going to be 5 years from now, 10 years from now? Are we looking at something completely different with these technologies? Is what we thought this nirvana state that's possible, is it possible?
Well, I think if I give a long view, no, in terms of the 10 years, I will split it maybe 5 and 5. I think in the next 5 years, at least in our industry, I think it will be fully integrated internally. All our process will be, I think all of them will be integrated, even if we are using different systems. And I think we're going to start to have certain degree of integration with our customers. Maybe not fully, but we will be around there. No? The second 5 years, I think, because our customers will also integrate with their customers that eventually will be citizens and cities and all that, I think we will start to see some kind of ecosystem integration in which many things, it will start to happen. At least the first 5 years, I think we're clear in the roadmap and how these things will materialize. The next one, we'll still to see how that will be evolved. But I think we're certain that the integration will be the next move.
It's over to you.
I agree. I think it is. I kind of talk about it as the art and the science, right? And as much as, and we've heard this over also the last day and a half, right? There are still humans at the center. So the whole piece of using data to make smarter decisions to help move us forward. I would agree. I think that kind of looking at it in kind of the 5-year model, a lot's happened in 5 years. Are we going to have a humanless robotic system in 10 years that everybody doesn't ever have to interact with humans? I don't think so, but I think we're going to continue to get smarter and maybe make some leap steps in the next 5 years, and then the next 5.
Most of the time, I don't want to call a restaurant to order food, so I use DoorDash, but I notice I keep getting in trouble from my wife because it's like a 40% premium. So I've stopped doing that, but I think that interactionless experience is actually a little bit better for me. Okay, so we're going to do, I know Karyn's got a flight, so we're going to get her out of here on time. She's got a driver waiting for her, but we're going to do a little lightning round here and ask some questions. So number 1, best kept secret in this whole digital experience space?
So my perspective is having a vision, a strategy, and a roadmap and governance. And that's all, it's 4 things, but it's one thing. Oftentimes I see companies trying to do certain components without a North Star. We also heard that over the last day and a half. Really having that vision, and that's how your employees all kind of, I think it was the vision and mission that Yuri talked about today. You have to have the vision before you can have the mission where everybody's going to be marching kind of to that same tune.
Okay, like that?
I think for me it will be co-creation with customers. And I think that should start with empathy from your customers. Yeah. And to have deep knowledge of what the process of your customers, the pain points. And I think many companies misunderstood that, and they run into troubles, big troubles. Yeah. So for me, you cannot improvise empathy. No? The customer is telling you the truth or not. No?
I don't want to change my vote, but I think that's like
equal. That one too. All right. No, but I think that's right. So to summarize, North Star, right? People got to see the vision as a part of that North Star, so it's bringing the entire company along in that process and getting them to understand it. And then go one step further, bring your customers into that process. Right. Don't design something for them without doing it with them.
Correct.
Okay, I like that. Number 2 on lightning round. What are the biggest design mistakes that customers make trying to come out of the gate to transform into a digital operations?
Well, I think it's the biggest mistake is if what you design is too complicated, it's not really bringing anything, do not launch it. My point of view will be, even though that maybe you have some pressure, I think if it is not really making the life for your customers easier, hold the temptation and just keep iterating.
I would say that it is allowing your organizational silos to get in the way, which relates back to my last comment around vision. There is so much around uniting the organization at the executive level, at the frontline level, at the middle, operational level. So busting down those silos to really, that comes through to the customer. And by marching along together and breaking those down, I think that I see that a lot with companies that are just, I can't get my CTO to do this, or I can't get my operations leader to do this. And it takes work, and it's a journey.
So I think time and time again, let me try to summarize some things here. I think we've been taught industry by industry and company by company that you can't not evolve, right? That sort of focus on that digital experiences is inevitable, or you will be innovated out of the environment. And to do that, I think you're right. It's like clear vision, make sure people understand it, don't over-design it, and work with your customers to do it. And never forget that you have to continuously innovate. And I think that sort of seems to be the lesson. And there's been plenty of companies along the trail that have sort of lost their way that I think are really good lessons for all of us to watch and think about. So appreciate my panelists today and the time for everyone, the audience today. And we'll call it an end here. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.